In this video, we're counting down 20 of the most remarkable ancient doors and entrances ever built. 20. The Great at Petra isn't man-made. It's a natural crack in the rock, over a kilometer long, with walls soaring up to 180 meters on either side. Walking through takes about 20 minutes, and the passage twists constantly, so you never see what's ahead. Then, all at once, it opens onto Al-Hazneh, the Treasury, a 40-meter temple facade carved directly into the cliff face. Despite the name, it almost certainly wasn't a treasury at all, but a royal tomb built for a Nabatean king in the 1st century, decorated with the Greek twins Castor and Pollux. It's probably the most photographed building in the entire Middle East, thanks in part to a certain archaeologist movie. 19. Around 1264 BC, Ramses II ordered 2 temples carved straight into a cliff at Abu Simbel. The larger one is guarded by 4 seated statues of the pharaoh, each 20 meters tall. Inside, a corridor stretches 60 meters back to a sanctuary holding 4 carved gods. Twice a year, sunrise lines up perfectly with the temple's axis, lighting 3 of those figures while leaving the 4th, the god of the underworld, in permanent darkness. That's not an accident. It's deliberate ancient astronomy. And in the 1960s, when the Aswan Dam threatened to flood the site, engineers sliced the whole complex into over 1,000 blocks and reassembled it higher up, recreating that same alignment down to the day. 18. Halfway up a 180-meter rock formation in Sri Lanka sit 2 enormous stone paws, all that's left of what was once a giant lion sculpture. Visitors to Sigiriya once had to climb straight through the lion's open mouth to reach the royal palace above. Built in the 5th century by King Kasyapa, the gatehouse stood roughly 35 meters tall, with a staircase running between the paws, up through the jaws, and out behind the head. It's less architecture and more intimidation, a deliberate psychological gauntlet before you even reach the top. 17. King Nebuchadnezzar II built the Ishtar Gate around 575 BC as the grand entrance to Babylon. Standing about 12 meters high, the double gateway was glazed in brilliant cobalt blue and covered with roughly 500 raised animal reliefs, sacred oryx, and dragon-like Moshusu creatures. The road beyond it was lined with 120 striding lions. Excavated in 1899 and shipped to Germany, the gate was eventually rebuilt inside Berlin's Pergamon Museum, though only the smaller front section made it there, with fragments still scattered across museums worldwide. 16. In 1963, a man renovating his house in Turkey knocked through a wall and stumbled onto Derinkuyu, an 18-story underground city carved 85 meters deep, big enough to shelter 20,000 people along with their livestock. At key choke points, massive circular stone doors, up to 1.5 meters wide and half a ton each, could only be rolled shut from the inside, making it impossible for attackers to force their way through. Every level could be sealed off independently, and the ventilation shafts doubled as wells inaccessible from above. Raiders would arrive to find a village standing empty, never realizing thousands were hidden beneath their feet. 15. Ireland's Newgrange, in County Meath, is a massive circular mound faced in white quartz, built around 3200 BC, 1,000 years before the Great Pyramid. Above its entrance sits a small opening called the roof box. On the morning of the winter solstice, sunlight passes through that opening, travels the length of a 19-meter passage, and floods the inner chamber for about 17 minutes. This was engineered by people with no writing, no metal tools, and no wheel, and it still works exactly as intended, 5,000 years later. 14. At Mycenae in Greece sits the so-called Treasury of Petra, built around 1300 BC. Really a tomb, not a treasury. The stone lintel above its doorway weighs about 120 tons, the heaviest single block lifted anywhere in Bronze Age Greece. Above it, a triangular gap redirects the crushing weight away from the doorway. Inside, a corbelled dome rises 15 meters across from 33 rings of stacked limestone. No keystone, no true arch, and for over 1,000 years, it remained the largest dome on Earth. 13. Around 480 BC, King Xerxes I built the Gate of All Nations at Persepolis. Its purpose spelled out in 3 languages carved into the stone. Xerxes redesigned the main approach with a grand double staircase built for slow, dignified ceremony, flanked by colossal stone bulls borrowed from older empires he'd conquered. A not-so-subtle message about who was now in charge. Persepolis was burned in 330 BC by Alexander the Great, but the gate is still standing today, even if the bulls have lost their heads. 12. High on the Bolivian plains near Lake Titicaca, at the ruins of Tiwanaku, stands the Gate of the Sun, carved from a single 10-ton block of stone. At its center, a carved staff god is surrounded by 48 winged attendants, part human, part condor. A band of abstract symbols below may encode a calendar system. 2 mysteries remain unsolved. The gate was found lying broken on the ground, and its current position doesn't line up with anything else at the site, meaning it was almost certainly moved from wherever it originally stood. 11. The Colosseum could hold up to 80,000 spectators and empty them out again in under 15 minutes, thanks to 80 separate entrance arches. 76 were for the public, each marked with a Roman numeral matching a ticket made of bone, clay, or pottery. The remaining 4, larger and unmarked, were reserved for the emperor and elite. Its internal corridors, called vomitoria, simply meant to disgorge a crowd, not what popular myth later claimed. 32 of those numbered arches still survive today. 10. The bronze doors of the Pantheon in Rome were cast under Emperor Hadrian nearly 1,900 years ago and are still in daily use, among the oldest functioning doors on the planet. Each leaf stands 7.5 meters tall and weighs roughly 8 tons, yet they're balanced so precisely on their pivots that one person can push them open. They survived only because the building was converted into a church in 609 AD, saving it from being melted down for metal, and remarkably, the original lock still works. 9. In western Germany stands the Porta Nigra, built around 180 AD and nicknamed the Black Gate for its dark, weathered stone. It's the largest surviving Roman city gate north of the Alps. Held together without mortar, just iron clamps set in lead. It survived total ruin because a Greek monk named Simeon walled himself inside one of its towers in 1028. Afterward, it was converted into a church for 700 years, making it untouchable, until Napoleon had the medieval additions stripped away in the early 1800s, revealing the Roman structure underneath. 8. In the 9th century, a caliph tunneled straight into the Great Pyramid because he couldn't find its real entrance, the same tunnel tourists use today. The actual doorway, described centuries earlier by the Greek geographer Strabo, was a movable stone slab hidden a little higher up. Archaeologist Flinders Petrie later found pivot hole marks confirming it. The whole pyramid was once wrapped in polished white limestone, so the sealed entrance would have been completely invisible until that casing was stripped away in the Middle Ages. 7. On Jerusalem's Temple Mount sits the Golden Gate, bricked shut for close to 500 years, the only sealed gate in the old city walls, likely built in the 520 SAD. It's been opened and resealed multiple times through history, with its final closure ordered in 1541 by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Jewish tradition holds the Messiah will enter through it. Christian tradition ties it to Jesus. Islamic tradition links it to the Day of Judgment, though some archaeologists suspect it was simply sealed for military security. 6. In the ancient city of Hierapolis in Turkey, a stone doorway built around 190 BC led into a small cave dedicated to the god of the underworld. Misty vapor drifted continuously from the opening, Animals that wandered too close would collapse. Yet the priests who tended it walked away unharmed. Rediscovered in the 1960s and fully excavated in 2013, the mystery turned out to be geological. A fault line beneath the site releases carbon dioxide that pools in a dense layer on the cave floor. The priests were simply taller than the invisible, deadly layer of gas. 5. On the edge of the Gobi Desert, hidden behind a painted mural inside one of the Mogao caves at Dunhuang, was a sealed chamber packed with nearly 50,000 manuscripts, scrolls, and paintings spanning 7 centuries, written in over a dozen languages, including the oldest dated printed book in existence. Sealed sometime in the 11th century and rediscovered by accident in 1900. Nobody agrees on why it was hidden. To protect damaged texts, to save them from invaders, or simply forgotten during a renovation. 4. On November 4, 1922, Howard Carter uncovered a sealed doorway stamped with royal necropolis seals leading into Tutankhamun's tomb. The seals were intact, though faint traces showed the door had been quietly reopened and resealed at least twice before by ancient robbers or officials. Weeks later, peering through a small hole into the chamber beyond by candlelight, Carter was asked what he could see and gave the answer that would make him famous. 3. Deep inside the Great Pyramid, 2 narrow shafts, barely 20 centimeters wide, run out from the Queen's chamber and simply stop inside the masonry. Unlike similar shafts elsewhere that reach the outer surface, unknown until 1872, they stayed a mystery for over a century until, in 1993, a small robot was sent up one shaft and hit a polished limestone slab with 2 corroded copper fittings, unmistakably a miniature door. 9 years later, a drill bored through it to reveal, not a chamber, but another sealed slab behind it. What either door actually leads to is still completely unknown. 2. In 1974, farmers digging a well in central China struck fragments of clay and uncovered the edge of the Terracotta Army. Thousands of individually sculpted soldiers guarding the tomb of China's first emperor, who died in 210 BC. The tomb itself, over a kilometer away, has never been opened. Ancient records describe a subterranean model of the empire, complete with rivers of flowing mercury, and modern soil tests have found mercury levels far above normal in exactly that pattern. It stays sealed, not out of superstition, but because early excavations proved that whatever's preserved inside would start deteriorating the instant it's exposed to air. 1. At the Padmanabhaswamy Temple in southern India sits Vault B, arguably the most contested unopened doorway on Earth. When a 2011 court-ordered inventory revealed nearby vaults stuffed with gold, coins, and jewels worth tens of billions of dollars, attention turned to the one vault still sealed. Tradition holds its inner door bears the carved image of 2 cobras and can only be opened through spiritual ritual, never force. In reality, investigators did open an outer grille and a wooden door behind it. But a jammed iron door stopped them before a locksmith could even be called in, at which point the royal family secured a court injunction halting everything. In 2020, India's Supreme Court declined again to allow it opened, citing religious sensitivity, not because it's physically impossible to get through, but because a country looked at the question of whether it should be opened at all and chose to leave it closed.